It took me forever to come up with the title of They Stay. I didn't know how to deal with this problem. When I wrote my book in high school, I knew what the title was going to be even before I started writing the book. It was never a question. I just knew that it was always going to be called Imperfect. In my experience, honestly, it's either like that and you always know exactly what you're going to call it, or you have no idea at all and the process makes you feel like you are banging your head against the wall for 100,000 years. For They Stay, it was the latter, and I just could not figure out what I was going to call it. In my head, I was calling it The Ghost Book, but obviously I knew that wasn't going to be the title, and I also couldn't think of any one-word punchy titles like I had for Imperfect that somehow summed up the conflict of the book, because they all sounded dumb. Like, love. Literally everything I tried didn't work, until it did. So in this video, I'm gonna share with you my entire titling journey for coming up with a title for They Stay, and at the end, I'm gonna give you some pointers on how you can brainstorm titles for your own books when you really just feel stuck. There were a few things that made They Stay hard to title. First, there were no distinctive place names in the book. Sure, the town had a name, and the cemetery had a name, but there were no places that were notable enough to carry the title of the book. The plot didn't rely on any sort of location. Second, it had no punchy themes. Ghost, as a title, has been done, and it's also pretty corny in this context. Third, I couldn't name it after any one of my characters because I was using multiple point of views, and I also didn't think that the book was necessarily about their lives so much as something that they did when they all worked together, so one character's name wouldn't work. Fourth, the book didn't follow any sort of meaningful event. Like, The Hunger Games is about the Hunger Games. There was nothing like that in They Stay. I did have some story questions and some conflicts that I might have been able to pull titles out of, but my issue was that the thing that differentiates They Stay from being another generic kid goes missing story is a little bit spoilery, so I didn't want to reveal that in the title because it's a really big moment in the book when that's revealed. They were also a bit too complex to put into a title. And when I first started trying to come up with the title, I couldn't think of any quotes that were compelling enough to sum up the entire conflict of the book. So as hard as I tried, nothing was coming to me organically. I couldn't think of anything that I could call the book, but I knew that I had to come up with a title, and so I sat down and tried to come up with a title actively. And in doing so, I tried a lot of things that failed. The first thing that I did is that I did a very generic brainstorm where I just tried to think of every single possible title that this book could have, and I wrote them all down in a document. I wrote all of them down regardless of whether they were any good. Just as soon as it popped into my head, I put it on the page. This is my original list. I have deleted ones from this list that I thought would be spoilers for the book, but as you can see, it's all over the place. I wrote down a lot of questions, I listed a lot of places and characters. I did the thing where I tried to use alliteration in the title, but all of these titles were not good. They were not very attention grabby, or if they were attention grabby, they didn't fit my story at all. So the next thing I did after that didn't work was that I redirected my strategy and brainstormed keywords that could relate to the horror and thriller genres. I did some research on common keywords used in titles in the thriller and horror genres. I scrolled through the bestseller charts on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and tried to pick out different words that I was seeing frequently, and I built lists of those. So instead of writing down things like, where did Max Olson go, I wrote down things like ghost and earth and blood, death, bodies, earth, corpse, rotting, graveyard, things like that. And then I tried to piece the words together, which gave me some pretty disjointed titles. The first title that I ever actively settled on for this book was The Man in the Long Green Coat. I liked this one, kind of, because I thought that there was something about that character that was interesting, like distinctive and memorable. But my big problem with this one was even though I liked the whole trope of the mysterious stranger arriving to town, there was so much in this book about ghosts and death and sibling love and all of that stuff that just didn't get reflected in the whole mysterious stranger trope. It also didn't capture any of the horror elements of this book, so I just scratched that one. The second title that I somewhat decided on was Finding Max Olson. This didn't work for very similar reasons to why The Man in the Long Green Coat didn't work. It captured the missing kid trope, but it didn't capture all of the horror, supernatural, ghosty things going on in the book. I also thought the title Dead Somewhere or Somewhere Dead would be kind of interesting, because at least like it has the dead keyword in it, but it wasn't connected to the supernatural element, and that's what I really wanted to come across in the title. So it felt like nothing was working, and this made me really frustrated because I knew I wanted to publish this book and I needed to have some way to refer to it when I was talking to people. But then one day I was browsing horror movies on IMDb or something, and I stumbled across the movie It Follows. I thought this was a really spooky title. I clicked on the movie, I watched the trailer. I didn't actually end up watching the movie. It's still on my to-watch list. But the title got me thinking about this quote that I had in my manuscript about pain. I don't think this quote is still in the book, but back then one of my characters was talking to another one of the characters and said something along the lines of, "That's the thing about pain. It stays." They were talking about phantom pain or phantom emotional pain, like the lingering effects of trauma. So I was like, that might be a decent title. It follows the same structure as the title It Follows, but it is slightly different. And it's also creepy because you don't know what the it is referring to. So when I started working with my editor, I submitted the book to her under the title It Stays. So I started referring to the book as It Stays. But I was talking to my dad about it one day, and he said that there was something about the title that just didn't really sit right with him. It was okay, but he didn't absolutely love it. But then I talked to my partner about it, and he said that maybe the reason that it wasn't sitting quite right is because the it in It Stays makes the book sound like it is somehow about zombies. Like the use of it suggested that it was something inhuman that was staying. But the ghosts in They Stay are extremely human, which is why instead I thought that it would be better if I changed the title from It Stays to They Stay. The use of the pronoun they indicates that the ghosts are human instead of inhuman. I also went back into the book and I changed some of the quotes around, so instead of there being an It Stays quote, there is a They Stay quote. I really like this title because it encapsulates the fact that these ghosts linger on the earth before they fade away after they die, but it also refers to the fact that our physical and emotional trauma can have lingering effects and stay with us even after that trauma has ceased. There's also another layer to it, which is the whole when your loved ones die, they never really leave you, they stay with you, which is also a big theme in the book. So that was kind of my process. It was a weird and a very messy process. But I also don't think there's a perfect system for coming up with titles. I had to change my title multiple times. So if you see a part of yourself in this story and you are struggling to come up with a title that you feel adequately fits your book, here are 5 tips to help you actively sit down and smartly brainstorm potential titles. So tip number 1 is come up with a list of keywords. Go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and look at all of the bestsellers in your genre and then write down words that you see used frequently in their titles. For example, if you write young adult fantasy, the words queen, crown, kingdom, rule, assassin, those are all used super frequently in those titles. Build a list of words like this in your genre and see if you can build a title around that. As I just told you, it didn't work for me, but that doesn't mean that it can't work for you. If you can work a word like that into your title, you can also send the subconscious message that this book belongs in this particular genre, which can help readers immediately understand what kind of book they're getting into if they pick up your book. My second tip is try to see if there are any important events or characters in your book. Usually, if there's a really important event in your book, your title is going to be more obvious. Like if you're writing a book about an annual game or festival, you can probably name your book after that annual event or festival, but it's something to keep in mind nonetheless. 3. Ask yourself what the main conflict is. What is the affliction of the main character in your story? What are they struggling with? What are they scared of? Are they in a very unique mental place at the beginning of their story? What are they facing? And what is troubling them? Maybe if you can answer these questions, you can start to come up with some words that could be used as a title. 4. Pay attention to quotes from the book. Or if you don't have any quotes that you think capture the main story of your book, try to actually, as a writing exercise, sit down and write quotes that you think capture the main heart of your book. Think of your characters, think of certain moments, actively try to write memorable quotes. In a separate document, in a notes document, on some scrap paper, this exercise might help you come up with some phrases that can help you title. And then if you pick a quote and you think it's really good and you end up naming the book after it, just find a way to work it in somehow, just like throw it in the manuscript. And my 5th tip is ask other people what they think. Sometimes it's hard to contextualize whether or not our titles are good and attention-grabbing when it's just us looking at them. But if you talk to other people about your titles, you tell them what you're thinking about, you run ideas by them, they are seeing that title probably for the first time, and they can give you a better gauge as to whether or not that title is capturing people's attention. Even just put a poll on your Instagram story and ask your friends. You can also join Facebook groups filled with other writers or other readers of your genre and ask questions there. If you have critique partners, you can ask your critique partners. The more people you talk to and the more opinions you get about the titles that you're thinking of, the better idea you're gonna have as to whether or not your title is on the right track. So that's my journey and how I titled They Stay. I hope this video was helpful to you, or at least gave you some kind of reassurance that you are not alone if you are struggling with coming up with a title for your book. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel. I post videos with actionable writing content every week. And if you're writing a book and really love your title, drop your title down below in the comments. Or also, I'm super happy to tell you whether or not I think your title is cool. If you want to comment down below, I will tell you whether or not it grabbed my attention. So yeah, drop your titles in the comments, and as always, have a good week everyone, and happy writing.